Hey, Rich.
Hey, how's it going?
Not too bad. How are you doing?
Good.
Excellent. Well, we are starting immediately. That's kind of how the setup works. So yeah, thank you so much for joining. Everyone, we have Rich Kahn, CEO and co-founder of Anura. How are you doing today, Rich?
Awesome.
Awesome. And so, as far as just for our audience, so they can be familiar with what you guys do, can you give me a little more information about Anura?
Sure. At the heart of it, Anora is designed to identify if a visitor that's interacting with your website is real or fake. And fake, we're looking at bots, malware, human fraud farms. So that's what it's supposed to do. That's the goal of the software, is to answer that simple question. There's a lot of complexity behind it and how it works. And then we have a complete reporting behind it. But at the end of the day, it's supposed to identify if the person's real or fake. And then based on that information, our clients can decide what to do with that information. Do I let them fill out a form? Do I let them into my website that's gated? Do I charge their credit card? Any kind of decision process they need to make, they can use that data for that purpose.
That makes sense. And in terms of kind of the types of companies you work with, are there certain kind of themes to that, like certain groups that you normally work with?
Well, we've done a lot of trade shows in the performance marketing space, lead generation space. So we have a lot of lead generators, agencies like Quinn Street and DMS and EverQuote, and then we have some brands like gaming companies like Gaijin, and we have Credit Sesame. And what's happening is, since we spent a lot of time doing the trade shows in the lead gen space, we ended up with a lot of lead gen clients. But our software starts to drip into other verticals based on word of mouth recommendations and just general, online advertising and stuff like that.
And I think that's interesting you said that, because that's kind of a trend that we're seeing here at Everflow in terms of like this tech, and whether it's fraud tech or platform tech, it starts out as something that's really kind of shoehorned into like the affiliate marketing space and the performance marketing space, but then it expands to other industries as well.
Right. Like, for example, my career started off in 93. So I've been doing this for 3 decades. But in the last 20 years, let's just look at the more recent part of my history. I ran a company that had a lot of affiliates driving traffic. And when you have affiliates, there's a high incentive to commit fraud. So it's an area that is one of the top verticals, or I should say marketing channels, for fraud. So for example, let's say search and social range somewhere between 10 and 15% fraud. So like your Googles, your Facebooks, things like that. Affiliate fraud averages about 45%. So
Wow.
very high on that side. It's actually, the only thing that beats it is programmatic.
Wow.
Programmatic averages about 50% fraud.
Yeah, that's quite a sizable thing that people are going up against, that kind of number.
Mhm.
Um, Interesting. And in terms of Anura, like how did you get started creating it? Like what made you decide to create the business?
Well, I started off in basically a digital marketing firm, pay-per-click marketing firm, or PPC network, as they were calling back in the day. And shortly after launching it, we started to have some issues with the data, and I started looking at it, and I knew it was fraud. I was dealing with fraud in other companies previous, so I knew how to deal with fraud, but I didn't want to deal with it. So I said, let me just go out, license a product, bolt it onto my platform, because I was building a platform, and go from there. And in 2005, I did a search. There was no fraud detection companies at all at that time. So as a
Oh wow.
developer, I figured, let me just develop it myself. So I built it. It worked great when I built it, and then it stopped. And then I had to continue developing it and realizing that it's not a fix and forget. You got to continue to build and optimize and work on it. And then 10 years later, I looked up and realized that there was a market for this type of software. So we did a year-long study in taking our technology and comparing to the market leaders at the time to see how we vetted out. If we weren't bringing anything new to the market, it didn't make sense for me to go to market with it. But we went to do our test. We realized we had a better, more accurate solution that was finding more fraud. So it was increasing ROI by a significant percentage difference over the competitors. So it made sense to enter the market. So in 2017 is when we rolled out Anora as a standalone licensable product.
That's fantastic. And going back to kind of what you said about kind of launching it and taking some time to retool it and adjust it, do you feel that most of these fraud prevention, either tools or companies, most of these organizations kind of just create their tech and don't make adjustments? Do you feel like they kind of just set it and forget it?
Yes and no. So there are a list of competitors out there that are doing the right thing. They've got the right tech resources behind them. They come from, we all come from slightly different lenses, right? We're looking at the traffic differently. So we all have our areas of expertise. Our area of expertise is performance marketing. And we feel that because of the accuracy and thoroughness of the solution. But just to give you an example, there are certifications that, a company like ours can go through to make sure we're keeping up with today's standards. So there's probably somewhere, and I talk about this all the time, there's probably somewhere between 75 and 100 companies in the marketplace that claim they do some type of fraud detection. Some of them are freaking marketing geniuses. I mean, they've got the cash behind them, and they've got an unbelievable marketing team behind them that's just crushing it in the marketing space. But when you actually test their tech, it doesn't work. And I had a guy that was using, for example, one of these technology solutions, and he came to me and he said, I'm using this solution right now and I'm catching 97% fraud on Google. I said, just think of what you just said. If it really was 97% fraud, don't you think there'd be some people out there that are spending millions of dollars a year would have a problem with that?
Yeah.
Convert.
Yeah.
So there is a certification process that companies like us can go through. And I'm not talking about like SOC 2 or any of those type of certifications where you just talks about housing data. I'm talking about a certification that actually looks at how you solve fraud, the databases you maintain, the processes and the procedures you use to stay on top of this stuff. And every year it changes, or actually it can be changing throughout the year. So what happens is a set of standards is put out, and you basically have a third-party auditor come in and look at the code, look at the databases, look at the processes and procedures, and basically sign off on, yes, you guys are following best practices for the current set of standards. So when you look at 75 to 100 companies that are out there, there's only 8 of us that have gone through and completed the certification process.
Oh, wow. And is there a name for that process?
Well, there's 2 companies that do it. You have the MRC, which is the Media Rating Council. A lot of people are familiar with that in the digital marketing space. They've been around for years. In fact, their website's straight out of 1995. If you look at it, built on front page. And then you have the Trustworthy and Accountability Group called TAG. So tagtoday.net. We like them from choosing one vendor over another, simply for the fact that they're international. We have a lot of international clients. And number 2, they allow us to produce the amount of data that we produce for our clients in our reporting interface. If I went through the MRC accreditation, they want me to dumb down my interface because I give up too much information and they don't want it to be reverse engineered. Well, again, if somebody can easily reverse engineer my code looking at data, then I'm not doing a good enough job, in my opinion. So you got to continue to stay on your toes.
For sure. That's very interesting. I mean, since I've been in the space, I've seen a ton of these companies, and that's great that there's a way to kind of ensure that you're up on the latest standards. That's fantastic. I was also going to ask you about that on another note. I know that a lot of companies, when they work with fraud tech, they get kind of concerned because basically they start working and they feel either that the tech is too lenient or too strict. Do you have a process at Anura where you take into consideration like the feedback from your customers as far as the effectiveness of your technology?
Yes and no. So, for example, when a client first comes to us, right, they're first concerned about, is it accurate? Because like in the lead space, right? Because a lot of our clients are both from the lead space. If I mismark a real user as fraud, I'm costing them dollars. It's not, pennies on a click. It's dollars on a lead. And if you're looking at torts and stuff like that, it could be hundreds of dollars on a lead, right? So accuracy is paramount. So we tell people when you first come to us, let's just monitor and analyze your data. And let's take a look at what we find. Then we're going to show the proof of the fraud through our dashboard to make sure they feel comfortable with what we're showing them. We even go so far as having them tag every one of their leads that comes through based on our result, whether it's good or bad, and then have them go and pull the records from the call disposition reports, look at those, and did you get the person on the phone? When the person got the person on the phone, did they recall filling out a form? There's things that they can do from a human standpoint to prove our technology. And that usually takes a little bit of time to get through that process, because I want our clients to feel comfortable with our decision process. And once they feel comfortable, then they can move forward and start doing real-time blocking and do all the fun stuff where they kind of set it and forget it. And then just look at the reporting to get a feel for where things are, if it's getting better or worse, new partners being brought on, are they a good partner or a bad partner? So they have all that ability. But yeah, so now you'll also have every once in a while, we challenge our clients for feedback. So we say, if we ever mismark a real person as fraud, let us know, because we want to look back at we can go back to that transaction, go through all the decision processing the system went through to come up with that result, and then find out where we think it may have gone wrong. If they can confirm, hey, I got the person on the phone, they said they definitely filled out the form, we believe you mismarked this one. That comes in, maybe we'll get one of those maybe once every 3 to 6 months. It's very rare.
Yeah.
Once in a while, we'll get somebody who has like all this rich behavioral data right behind the scenes, like we're at the login process to protect the login. Once they log in, now they're, let's say, playing video games, and they may be playing video games for hours on end. They have all this rich behavioral data, and they'll come back and say, hey, you marked this person as real, but based on all the behavioral data, we believe it to be fraudulent. And then we could take that type of traffic, go back to the system and take a look and see if there's something we missed, because there's new forms of fraud coming out on a regular basis, and you got to stay on top of that.
That's fantastic. The communication back and forth is great. And I think that is an essential kind of key when you're working, you're working against fraud, because these tools are fantastic, but there has to be, they're not perfect. And your process definitely seems like the right way to go in terms of listening, making adjustments, soliciting feedback. I think that's fantastic.
Yeah, and it's important. Like I said, we're building this for our customers, and it's kind of interesting too. Like, if we got one person who gets attacked where our system is not able to identify, or it's a new threat, right? A new threat comes in the door from one of our vendors, one of our clients, and we see it. We go to town, we fix it, we roll out a new update. The roll update goes out to all the clients. So
makes everybody better.
Yeah, it makes it's everybody's helping each other. So as we grow and we're adding new clients, we're collecting more and more data. I mean, right now, last I checked, we were pushing something like 3 billion visitors a day that we're scanning. So we're scanning a lot of people. It's very rare somebody comes to us with traffic we haven't seen yet. Like I said, we've been tracking all this data since 2005. So you've got about 17 years of data analysis that we've been doing on billions of visitors a day. So we see a lot of data. But every now and again, somebody, there's a hacker that wants to get around this particular client. We throw up our shield, and we're now protecting them, and they try to find a way in, they get in. A new browser comes out, it's got a security hole. They take advantage of that. And as we're finding it, as our machine learning is picking up on it, as we're getting reports in, as we're identifying it ourselves, like I said, we're probably rolling out 1 to 2 new fraud updates every single week. That's how often we see the changes.
Fantastic. Yeah, I can imagine how quickly it changes. And in terms of your business versus like the competition, is there a particular reason why people choose you guys over the competition?
The biggest reason I think we find this reputation, because a lot of people in the space have tested one of these other solutions, that just doesn't do the job as well as we do. And so our reputation comes up, and that becomes a big thing. But it really comes down to, I would like to find out from as many people as possible why they choose us. And it's usually because of the accuracy and thoroughness of our solution. When they realize, there are cheaper solutions than us, there are more expensive solutions than us. When it comes to the certified solutions, the 8 certified solutions, we're one of the most cost-effective solutions in that category. But people will go to hey, I want to save a couple bucks, and they want to trust their campaign to somebody else, and they do. So they'll choose somebody over price because their price is a little bit cheaper. They'll go to that person, and then months later they come back and say, yeah, we want to go with you guys. And I always ask in a situation like that, okay, you vetted out a couple people, you went with one, and then you changed your mind. Why? And they found it. And the number one reason I hear is that the other solution just didn't do the job. It didn't work. They put on a good show. They put on a great pitch. Their price is cheap, but just because it's cheaper doesn't make it better.
Interesting. Yeah. It's like you get what you pay for, or penny wise, pound foolish, as they say. So that's it's very interesting. And I could see how that's tempting. We have that similar situation with our competitors. Sometimes we get people who get wooed by these platforms that have just, really basic features, but the price is dirt cheap, and they'll go with it. And they'll end up coming back because they'll say, yeah, nothing, it didn't work out. So yeah, that definitely makes a lot of sense. And in terms of getting to the topic of the day, ad fraud, and in terms of building a strategy for new traffic partners. So working with new traffic partners it can be a scary thing. I mean, you could be a brand, and you're looking to launch your campaigns, and you have all these really, attractive sources that seem like they're going to take you to the next level. But fraud is such a big threat that, you can be brought to reality pretty quickly. And so today, yeah, we're just going to cover kind of building a strategy for when you're working with new traffic partners, because they're a new relationship and you're getting to know them and kind of what to look for. And so starting out, I guess the first question I'm going to ask you is, I know you mentioned before ad fraud, the state of it. So you would say that overall it's about 45% in the affiliate space, and maybe even more in programmatic?
Programmatic runs based on all the programmatic DSPs that we've tested. On average, we're finding about 50% fraud. So almost half of the traffic. Like, again, if you're buying programmatic, which is kind of interesting, it's one of the bigger channels of marketing because it's everywhere, right?
Yeah.
Almost every DSP that you tap into is going to tell you that they're using some type of fraud detection system. The problem is they're using a pre-bid solution known as a GIVT filter, general invalid traffic filter. It's great for finding bots, data center attacks, things like that. And that'll trap your basic type of fraud, and usually in those cases, they'll catch 1% to 3% fraud. What happens is after the impression is purchased and the ad unit shows up on a website and gets displayed, the sophisticated fraudulent traffic gets past that basic filter, and you end up getting exposed to it. So if you run a sophisticated invalid traffic filter, also known as SIVT, on the impression itself, that's where you're going to catch the fraud, and you're going to see it. It's on average 50%. I actually caught a DSP with 87% fraud. And it made a lot of sense when you started looking at the back end numbers, conversion values, and everything else. When you look at affiliates, because that's what we're talking about, is affiliates, they typically come in right around 45% on average. Some are better, some are worse. I've seen affiliates with almost 100% fraud, and I've seen affiliates with less than 1% fraud. But that average is 45%. But if you look at all marketing channels combined, we're finding on average, we take on a new client for the first time, on average, we're 25%.
Okay, interesting. And in terms of kind of circling back to the affiliate piece of it, are there certain types of marketing methods that affiliate marketers are using right now that are more fraudulent than others?
Not really.
Okay.
They're attracted to anything where they can make money, because let's face it, how quickly do affiliates get paid? Quickly, right? That's like, if you want to attract good quality affiliates, you got to pay them every 7 or 14 days. Like, they got to get paid within a week or two from the time they send traffic. But if you look at back end and analytics, it could take weeks or months, usually months, to identify the fraudulent traffic. And by then it's already gone. I'll give you a perfect example. I had a client that was doing credit card transactions. They were actually selling, this is pre-pandemic, they were booking 30,000 airline tickets a day through their e-commerce platform. And it took them on average 9 months to get the chargebacks.
Wow. Yeah. So that nothing, it's too late. Yeah.
They pay their affiliates out every 15 days. So you can see an affiliate can commit fraud and hang around for a long time before the data caught up with them. And then they shut their account down, didn't pay them for the rest, charge them back, but you can't charge affiliate back. Once you pay them and the check clears or the wire clears, you're done. The money's out the account. Then you're not going to get the money back. So they're able to do that. So yeah, I haven't seen any area where it's more prevalent than others. Like I said, lead generation is very attractive because you get paid dollars per lead, right? Click traffic is going to be, well, the click traffic depends on the network. Some networks are, 10, 15 cents a click. So while they can do this in volume and make a good amount of money, it's still, there's still less per transaction, but the transactions are easier to fake. So like I said, I've seen it across the board. I've even seen where they're whipping out credit cards and processing charges, fake charges. They don't care where the product goes because they're making the affiliate commission.
Interesting. And that kind of ties into sort of the next question here. If you're a brand and you're working with some new traffic partnerships, what kind of, I know you just mentioned the example of, waiting for these chargebacks to occur. But what other kind of dangers can you run into in the fraud space if you're working with new traffic partners?
Well, whether it's new partners or older partners, and I'll explain why I talk about that. When you run into fraud, there can be like, okay, let's talk about the lead space, because again, both our clients heavy in the lead space. There's issues like TCPA compliance. Let's say somebody comes along and let's say they're using a human fraud farm because they don't want to get caught with bot detection software. So they license a human fraud farm. They're about $9 an hour anywhere around the globe. So they're cheap to hire. They come along and they fill out Tony's information into a form. They put your phone number, easily find your email address and your phone number. It's in your signature, right? They put in all the basic information that they need to get the form filled. They hit submit. It goes to the next piece in the funnel, which says, okay, does Tony's email address and phone number match? Does the data look accurate? Yeah, it looks accurate. Boom. It's then passed to the call center. Within seconds, somebody's calling that number. Now, your phone starts ringing and you're just sitting there working throughout the day. All of a sudden, your phone starts ringing. You don't recognize the number. Chances are you don't answer that call, right? But let's say you did answer that call. The person says, hey, I'm Tony. I'm calling you based on the information you filled on the form to, I don't know, get solar for your house. And you're like, I never filled out your form. I already have solar, right? Whatever the case is, right? I never filled out your form. Well, that person who just picked up and made that phone call just broke TCPA compliance because they called you without your express permission to call them. So I know there's a lot of tools out there for compliance. So you got like the active prospects, Journeys. They're there to monitor and make sure all the compliancy stuff is there. The one thing that they cannot do, and they'll typically recommend us for this, is they can't tell you who's behind the keyboard. Because if it's not you behind the keyboard putting your information in, then the caller doesn't have your express permission to call them. That's a TCPA violation.
And those can get pretty costly, right?
Well, it's the fastest growing class action lawsuits in this country. So
oh, wow.
It's huge. So imagine this. Let's say you get caught and you're like, you know what? I'm sick and tired of this. And let's just call it big brand, right? Rather than picking on somebody. Let's say big brand calls you and you're like, I'm tired of this. All of a sudden TCPAlawyers.com pops up on your TV. You're like, I'm calling these guys because I'm tired of getting these calls. Like my phone rings off the hook. I can't even answer it because so many of these people calling. You call a lawyer finds out, oh, this is big brand. They have deep pockets. So now they do, let's subpoena all your records of all the people you've called. And then they'll look for how many people got tagged saying that they didn't fill out the form. Then they'll call those guys and try to get a class action lawsuit together. Now you're talking tens of millions of dollars.
Wow.
So it can get very, like normally if a one-off TCP violation could be anywhere from $500 to $1,500. Not the end of the world, right? Companies that are calling can afford to do that. But what happens if they're calling 100,000 or 1 million people a month? Do the math. It just gets out of control. And again, they call you one time, right? So let's say they call you and you don't answer it. And they call you 3 or 4 times a day for a week because they believe you filled out this form. Every one of those calls, you as a consumer are entitled to $500 to $1,500 per call.
Wow, yeah, that could get out of hand quickly for sure.
Yeah.
And in terms of I guess with fraud threats and kind of like you just mentioned there, in terms of that, has there been an emerging type of fraud that you've seen lately? Something that's come out that's kind of new in the last, like, say, 6 months. That's kind of hitting most of the industries of the clients you work with.
Well, the most recent type of fraud that's hitting that I can talk about, because I can't get into the details of the type of frauds that they're using.
For sure.
What I talk about is human fraud. Human fraud is the hardest to catch because it's a real person behind the keyboard. Right? What's Google's product for bot detection? reCAPTCHA. Well, guess what? If a human comes to a form and it's got a reCAPTCHA, they're going to fill it out just the same as you or me. So it defeats any type of standard bot detection type software. If you're using like an active prospect or a Journeys and you're monitoring the video play or using Microsoft Insights or Hotjar or something and you watch the video play, it's a real person because it is a real person. So it's one of the hardest ones to catch. And then when they type, they don't type with a set number of milliseconds between each keystroke like a computer typically would. It's random type because it's somebody physically typing. So all the behavioral patterns and all the stuff you would try to catch a bot doing doesn't exist with human fraud.
And is this human fraud, or is this like basically people in, say, like a click farm or something doing this stuff?
Yeah. So remember
Okay.
the old click farms, right? I call them human fraud farms because they're doing a lot more than just clicking. They're clicking, they're filling out forms, they're using stolen credit cards to fill out, e-commerce transactions. They're doing a lot. So I just call it human fraud farms because they commit so many different things. But think of how easy it is. If I decided to hire one of these guys for $9 an hour, gave them a list of stolen information that I had. I want you to go to this affiliate link, fill out this form with this information. How many forms in an hour can they fill out?
Yeah.
30, 20, 30 comfortably without breaking a sweat, right? And if you do 20 or 30 times the average payout per lead completion, let's say is 10 or $15 for on average. Again, it all depends on the vertical, right? Some verticals are worth hundreds. But if you charge $10 or $15 and you're making $10 or $15 a lead, they fill out 20 or 30 leads. You do the math on that, minus your $9 an hour, you're very profitable. And it's very hard to catch.
Interesting. And in terms of either whether it's human fraud or any kind of any other type of fraud, moving into when you're working with a new partner. So say you're a big brand and you find either some affiliates you're working with or some networks. As far as working with a new partner, what should you look for as far as evaluating whether you should work with a new partner or not?
Well, the first stuff is to vet out your partner, right? Get them on the phone, meet them at a trade show, be able to know that you can actually get the person on the phone and they're not,
A human person, yeah.
right. You want to make sure you're
Yeah.
dealing with somebody you can talk to. This is obvious that this is like 1990 stuff, right? Make sure you can talk to them. Make sure you can find them on LinkedIn. Make sure the picture is actually their picture. Do a reverse picture lookup. We actually did that on one of affiliates, and it was, I don't know if you remember, but a couple of years back, well, maybe probably 10 or 15 years back, there was a cyclist in Hawaii who was in a big Hawaiian cyclist race. I think she was like 23 years old, and something happened, and she fell off the mountain and died. They used that picture that was posted in the newspaper as their picture in LinkedIn. So, I mean,
that's ridiculous.
It was.
Yeah.
That's the level that we used to do. So, like, if somebody calls, take their images, we do all the research, find out who they are. Then I want to talk to them and find out, what are you doing to mitigate fraud? Like, are you just letting all the traffic through and then I'm getting stuck with it because I'm the one on the hook? Or are you doing something to protect me since I'm the buyer? Right?
And they should be, and sorry to interrupt, but they should be doing that if they want to make sure that most of their leads work out.
Yeah. If they're a good affiliate, they're doing something. Maybe they have a third-party software like ours, but they have some type of process that they're going to sell you on and you're going to believe. Now, the biggest mistake a lot of people that I see make, and affiliates know this, is they turn on, they study that traffic from a new partner for a couple of weeks, and then once they feel after a couple of weeks they're good to go, they let the floodgates hit and they don't look at it again. And affiliates know this, so affiliates will send you good quality traffic in the beginning, wait till the vetting process is over, and then flip on the fraud.
Interesting. So, and is that a case of they'll do it for like a couple weeks, or is it like a month, like till they get their first kind of payment?
A lot of times, believe it or not, the buyer who's dealing with the affiliate will tell them, like, we're going to put you through a vetting process for 2 weeks. We're going to check your traffic for 2 weeks and see how it vets out. If it vets out good, we'll give you access to premium traffic. And it's the same story all the time. So the affiliate now knows what the timeline is, because it's going to be different for every company. Some companies may, the smart ones, based on time and everything else, will randomly spot check the traffic for every one of their affiliates. But that's time consuming. You got 100 affiliates. You got to now have a department in your company who's spot checking that traffic on a regular basis to look for fraud. That's why a tool like ours is so cost effective, because it does it for you on every single transaction, and you don't have to spend the money to have a team doing it. But the biggest problem I see is after vetting out a client, just letting it go and assuming it's going to continue to be good. But I'll give an example. I use this on another webinar I did recent, but it's such a great example. I had a client, they set up with us, they understood the product, they got it, put everything online, and he wasn't real-time blocking yet. He was just using the data to analyze and understand where the traffic was coming from. And he started off about 20% fraud, but he had one outlier, which was 40% plus fraud. So he's telling me about this source. He's like, this is the source. We went through it. I showed him and proved to him beyond a shadow of a doubt why it was fraudulent. And he says, okay, well, I got a problem. I got to call this guy today. And he was my college roommate. So is he trying to screw me? I'm like, no. He's your friend. He's not trying to screw you, but somewhere down the line of where he gets his traffic is screwing him, which in turn is rolling up to you. So here's the data that you need to talk to your friend and say, this is what I'm finding. Can we put an end to it? And within 10 minutes, they were able to use the data to pinpoint the sub affiliate that was causing the issue, eliminate it, and create a good working relationship.
Yeah, that's fantastic. So the data, it kind of never lies. It kind of got to what was happening, and it kind of knocked out the accusatory nature of a lot of these things. And I've seen that before in the past company I worked with too. I worked for an affiliate network before, and there's a lot of, when there's fraud traffic, like, the person's trying to do this on purpose, or like they're like, this is their goal. And in reality, yeah, it could be a sub affiliate. It could be something that's just a quirk in how they're doing things. It's hard to know until you actually drill down and look at these things.
Yep. But the data, like I said, it's always make database decisions, right? Look at the data, let the data tell you what you're seeing, and then get the explanation for it. Why is this happening?
For sure. And in terms of, I know you mentioned before about working with affiliates, and kind of a brand will start going and they'll say, this is how we're going to do it. And then after a while, the affiliates will kind of, start doing things and letting the fraud go after a while, and start going back to their kind of goals to fraud the offer. So in terms of that, I know that working with performance networks is a great way for any brand to just get a ton of traffic, reach a ton of different geos, reach, very targeted users. There's a lot of potential, but with networks, an offer can just explode overnight. So working with networks, are there different types of fraud checks that you recommend for your clients?
Well, it's always follow the money, right? See what's happening. You got to look for, when you're doing it manually yourself, there's so much data that you're collecting. You just got to look at it. Are you looking for affiliates that, they're doing this and all of a sudden they spike in growth overnight? They found a campaign that's easy to manipulate and they're going to just run with it. How is the performance behind the scenes, a true back-end performance? If it's an insurance campaign, are they writing a policies behind the scenes for that sub-affiliate? There's so much data that you can look at to help you try to edge your bet. But like anything else, it's going to take time, and time is money to be able to do that. But if you're going to be in this space and you want to be here for a long time, you got to do that. You got to spend the time, you got to spend the money, because if you don't, I can't tell you how many people I've spoken to who have lost their previous business because of fraud. And now they're spinning up another company, and everything I can tell, they seem like good actors. They want to do things right, but some sub-affiliate got a hold of a couple campaigns and took out their top clients and killed the company.
That's it definitely is a big commitment, and I think that's another thing that people getting started in performance marketing need to kind of understand, is that it's not something that you can just turn on this traffic and you're getting all these leads. You have to work at it. You have to be dedicated, and I think that's what you have to be focused on the long term. And I know that there's a lot of companies especially in the affiliate space, that start out, they just want to get as big as possible, and they don't work because they don't take the time to do it and do it right. And so, yeah, in terms of that, I know you mentioned, circling back, you mentioned the data as far as like, when you're working with these new partners, are there any specific metrics, like just maybe a couple that you'd recommend that a company looks for when they're evaluating the traffic or new partners, beyond, say, the standard, like, clicks and conversions?
I said follow the money, right? So that's all that back end marketing analytics that you got to do. But I look at, where's the traffic coming from? What versions of browsers are they using? What cities are they coming from? You're looking at all that data. It adds up. What browser language is coming through? I mean, I had a client we're firing off that had a huge amount of fraud, to come to realize he's targeting the US, but the majority of the browser languages coming in were Russian. That's not the norm.
Yeah.
The data doesn't make sense. There's a reason for it. So you got to look at, there's so much data that comes through, whether it's you're looking at your log files. There's a couple of my competitors, that's all they do is they focus on log files. They take all that log data, they roll it up into a dashboard and try to analyze it that way. Now we do all that too. We go beyond what you can find in a log file, but that data is so rich and so telling. That's what we call our proof of fraud, right? So something comes through and it's fraudulent. There's almost always some type of pattern behind it. Where is it coming from? Like, we know if it's coming from the US, there's four states that should always be your top states, right? It's going to be California, Texas, Florida, and New York, based on population. Those are the most populated states. Therefore, by default, they get the most traffic. I get a client that comes up and they're targeting the US and the majority of traffic is coming from Iowa. I got a problem with that. Just because it comes from Iowa doesn't make it bad. But when you start looking at all the data behind it, like, wow, they got a lot of data. That's a simple question. Hey, go to your affiliate. I'm targeting the US. All your traffic's coming from Iowa. Why? Get that.
Yeah.
Maybe they've got a legitimate explanation. Hey, we got a bunch of kiosks out in Iowa that are pushing out this traffic. Okay. Show me, let me see an example. Like, you really should just dig for the data, because if you're the buyer from an affiliate of that data, you're entitled to that. The buyer has the cash, right? The cash is king.
For sure. And I think that the data, all that data is out there, whether it's on your tool or whether it's on, some of the things we do at Everflow. Like, the data is there. You just have to kind of look at what story is happening, really. Like, what is the circumstance? Is this a normal situation? Is this something that, can be proven that it was how it should be? And yeah, it's very interesting, because I think that a lot of issues with fraud, it's kind of like, is this legitimate? Yes or no, and that's it. But they don't really evaluate the kind of the circumstances of it. Like you mentioned, if your traffic number one source is like Iowa, Missouri, or something, then it's kind of odd if it's a domestic campaign.
Yeah, and you've got to get answers to those questions. You're the buyer.
Yep.
You deserve to know those answers. Just like if you're taking that traffic and selling it down to your buyer, because you're the middleman, right? Acquiring all this traffic and then sending it down, you could be assured eventually somebody downstream is going to ask, why is it all coming from Iowa? These are questions that you need to know the answers to before the call comes in. The last thing you want is somebody calling you up and saying, hey, I've noticed all the traffic's coming from Chrome version 79. And you're caught off guard, like, what do you mean? I didn't even look at that. Like, that's the last thing you want. You want to know the data before a client calls. Once a client calls, they're looking at a reason potentially to cut you off. And that's not where you want to be. You want to have the information ahead of time, what you're doing to prevent fraud, all these things that you're trying to do to protect your buyer, because they're looking to you for that information, just like you need to look to your, in this case, affiliates. I mean, think about it this way. Everflow houses a huge amount of data for their clients. There's tons of data they can start going through on your system alone to help them identify some of the stuff as they're putting stuff together.
Yeah, and on that note too, I think it's also kind of on a brand to or a business to get with their tech partners they're working with, whether it's Anura, Everflow, or whoever they're working with, and say, okay, what is possible from a data perspective? What can we learn? What kind of things are out there? Like, what can we track? And by knowing that, you can do your best job to kind of start, understanding the narrative of all this traffic and how it's coming in.
Mm-hmm. Very, very true.
Excellent. In terms of, so say you're working with some new partners and basically, you start working with them and all of a sudden you start getting hit with fraud. In the case like that, is it an immediate thing where basically that's it, the relationship should be terminated? Or is it something where you want to go back and give them kind of understand how it's happening and maybe give them another chance? Like how lenient should a company be when they're hit with a fraud from a new partner?
Well, you got to realize it's very rare, but it does happen. It's very rare that you get 100% fraud from a partner or 0% fraud from a partner, right? There's always that in between, right? If you're getting 100% fraud from a partner, I would say cut them off. There's nothing there of salvaging, right? Just cut them off, get rid of them, stop working with them. If it was 100% good, give more money because they're doing things right. But it's always that in between stuff, right? So that's a business decision that a client would have to make. What percentage of fraud is too much that I don't want to deal with the person? Is it 50%, 60%, 70%? My first thought when I was building up my marketing firm was, I don't care if they have 97% fraud. As long as I can block that fraud, I'm not paying for it, I'm not reselling it, I can get rid of it, and I can cherry pick that 3% that's good, and then do the back end math to see if running all that technology to do that makes sense. If I'm still making profit, then it makes sense to cherry pick the good stuff and work with it. But again, you have platform fees, you have, fraud detection fees, you have human analysis fees. There gets to a point where you decide, hey, once they're over a certain percentage of fraud, I don't even want to deal with them anymore. It's just not worth it. Then you do a cutoff. However, going back to the other part of that question is, how much information do you share with them? Depends on your relationship with the client, with the source. I talk to clients all the time. They don't have, it's kind of 50-50. Half of them have really good relationships where they've gone out to dinner. They know the wife, the kids, they're good friends. They went to college together. There's a time where you can share information and say, hey, this is what I'm seeing. I don't want it. Get rid of it, send it someplace else. Just don't send it to me, and we can continue working together. And again, if they're using a tool like ours and they're blocking in real time, they can digitally slice out all that bad stuff. But their affiliate needs to know, hey, I'm not going to pay for this if it's fraud. So get rid of it. Don't sell it to me. But if you send it to me, I'm going to block it and I'm not going to pay for it. Right. And then you got, like I said, then you got the other ones where you don't know them. Don't share anything. If you can't get these guys on the phone and have a conversation, you can't meet them at a trade show or something. If you just don't feel 100% comfortable with them, first off, you probably shouldn't let them on your network in the first place. But if they are on your network and you're just having, issues be careful what you share. It's your data. So you want to be careful how much you share, because if you say, hey, I notice you're doing this, you're sending me all the traffic from Iowa. Okay, we'll stop sending from Iowa, we'll send it from Michigan.
Yep. Yeah, so that's something that happens. I see that happen all the time. It's basically, you don't want to give too much info to anyone you don't trust, because they'll use that to reverse engineer what you're doing for sure.
Yeah. So again,
interesting. Oh, go ahead. Sorry.
No, I was going to say that comes back to how you build your network. Like I said, you got the more established companies have really solid relationships. In fact, several of them right now won't even take on new affiliates unless they use our software, which is awesome. They've been using it for years. They trust it. They won't even touch them if they're not using our software. So they know at least it's cleaned as far as fraud comes, right? But some of the other ones, especially the newer guys, they come on board, they start onboarding all the different affiliates as fast as they can, because it's like, I got to build this company fast, right? Bring on all these affiliates, and they have blind affiliates. They come up, they sign up, and they start, and all of a sudden these affiliates are like, fresh fish in the water. Let's take advantage, because they don't do anything. They're not vetting me out as an individual. I can start them off with a high percentage of fraud. They won't even catch it. That's a problem, and I see that happen a lot with a lot of these newer companies. They don't want to get somebody on the phone and find a reason to shut them off, or can't get them on the phone, so they can't bring them on as an affiliate. They just want the affiliate, just come on board and we'll deal with it. And their kind of logic, I hate to say, is these types of vendors, these types of networks, they're kind of like, I'll keep selling it to my clients as long as my clients don't have an issue. And that's a wrong ideology to have with traffic. Like, if you're going to build a company and you're not in it for a quick buck, you're here to actually build a company, then you got to take some time, effort, energy, money, maybe depending on what you're doing, to make sure that you're delivering quality to your clients. So your clients will continue to grow with you. They'll spend more money per lead or per click or whatever it is you're selling them, and they'll grow with you. But if you just try to take the quick way out and try to make a quick buck, it doesn't usually end well.
Yeah, and that's definitely kind of goes against the kind of the flashiness that many people kind of portray in the affiliate marketing space. It's basically, oh yeah, do this, work from home, you can make all this money, you can be driving these fast cars, things like that. And the quick profit is not you're not gonna stick around. So that's great that you mentioned that, as far as like, you have to be able to build a business. This is a business. It's not a get rich quick scheme.
Yeah.
Excellent. And in terms of like so say you're running with a new partner and, and things are going, all right, traffic is, the fraud level's decent, things are going well, with the amount of leads they're sending. Um, how often should you kind of evaluate their traffic? Is it something that, you kind of zoom in like once a month and kind of see how it's going, or is it something where you just kind of let the tools do the work? Like how often should you kind of check in on it?
Um, it's different for every company because it comes down to resources and everything else. But if you have us on real-time mitigation, which is basically filtering out, they're digitally slicing out every bad transaction coming in the front door, there's not a whole lot of manual work that you need to do, which is great. It's a time saver. We even have a case study from a client saving them over 400 hours a quarter. I mean, it was a massive amount of time. However, you still want to take a look at the reports at minimum once a month, just to get a beat on what's going on. Or if you have a source of traffic that calls up and complains, hey, all of a sudden you start blocking more of my traffic, then you want to drill in and take a look at it. But I'm one of those guys, like I said, if I can save a client a lot of time, why not? Right. If we're doing the real-time mitigation so they don't have to babysit it, awesome. And that's what happens a lot. That's kind of the progression of our clients. Our clients first start off just putting their foot in the water, testing it out, looking at the technology. As time goes, they start building a trust in the technology. They get to the point where they're like, all right, this is awesome. Let's go real-time mitigation. And then they'll keep checking back every couple of days to look at the reports. And then they start looking at less and less and less. And then it gets to the point where, we have our CSM reach out once a month, and it's like, oh, I haven't even logged in the last 6 months. I just know you guys are doing the job. No complaints from the customers. Let's just keep rolling on. Like there's nothing I need from you guys right now. Everything's great. So that's kind of like the progression of our clients. They get so trustworthy of the technology that unless something pops up, they know we're protecting them. It's kind of like a firewall, right? Every network has a firewall. How often do you look at the firewall reports? It's never. I'm a tech guy. We don't look at that. Like you build it, you set it and forget it. And it's doing its job. When it stops doing its job because something's getting past and you got to go update rules or whatever else, that's when you jump back in. But it becomes that situation where you set it, trust that it's doing its job, and then forget about it.
For sure. And you also have you mentioned as far as saving time, and you have a certain amount per day that you can focus on these things, certain amount of hours. And so, yeah, constantly kind of watching everything all the time, it's just gonna be, not too productive. And so that makes a lot of sense as far as once things get going, if there's no issues, you have to trust the tech and trust your process of how you do things to kind of make sure that it's running. And then just don't focus unless you need to. If it's running smooth, just keep it going.
And that's pretty much it. Like we're actually going to we have in Q1, we have a new report coming out that will basically email all of our users of the platform a report showing what we did for the month, how much fraud we're still catching, who the biggest fraudsters are on the network, who are the best traffic quality. Give them a good how much money and actual fraud we detected, so they can actually put some dollars and cents to it. So they can actually see what's going on, because that's the biggest question. Like, if you're not logging into my system at least once a month to take a look and just get an idea of what's going on, 6 months from now, we're kind of out of sight, out of mind. That's not a good thing for a SaaS company, right? You always want to be front of mind, like your system, they're constantly logging in, putting new campaigns. And that's kind of that situation of what they're used. So they're constantly in the system. They need the billing, they need the reporting. That's something with us. Once they build the trust and they put us on a real-time mitigation model, that's it. You've solved the fraud problem for your network. You don't have to deal with it anymore. It's done. It's handled. Unless something happens, you're set and forget. I've got clients, we call all of our clients once a month from our CSM department. And there's clients we haven't heard from in years. And I'll run to them in a trade show. I'm like, oh yeah, our CSM's been trying to reach you just to touch base, make sure, oh, Rich, everything's fine. Nothing, everything's status quo. Doing a great job. We love the software. It's awesome. And that's that. And that's okay. But I still feel more comfortable if people were logging in on a more regular basis just to take a peek and see what's going on.
Yeah, that makes sense. And it shows that they are actively using it and also just are invested in what's going on. And that makes a ton of sense. And we're kind of getting close to the end of the time. But before we go, I wanted to ask you, so in terms of fraud, I know there is, I've heard stories throughout the years of just crazy campaigns that affiliates were running and all sorts of, fraud examples, phone farms, people people using 15 phones at once to do an offer, things like that. Is there, just in your experience, in your history, is there, I guess, what is the craziest example of fraud that you've ever seen?
It's been a lot, but there's one that stands out. And this is going back probably 12, 15 years ago. So this is when, in the beginning stages when I was still building and it was, I don't know if you remember this, but remember a lot of times on the browsers, when you clicked on a link, you used to hear a click.
Yep.
Remember that, right?
Yep.
So it was kind of interesting. You click and you hear click, click as you move around. So we're tracing down this fraud that's coming from a given affiliate and happen to be affiliate, right? And me and my partner sitting there side by side, going through the data, just having it. We know it's fraud. We just can't figure out what they're doing, and we're trying to figure it out. So my partner clicks on something, and I hear click, click. And I go, wait a second, did you click on 2 links that quick? He goes, no, I clicked on 1 link. I go back and do it again. So he does it again. Click, click. Long story short, what we found was they were somehow through malware through malware on the website, able to embed a 1x1 iframe pixel underneath the tip of the mouse pointer. So as you're moving around the page, you're actually moving around because basically, just so everybody is on the same page, because not everybody knows this, if I was to take a piece of paper, right, and then cover that with another piece of paper and poke a hole in that paper, that hole represents the iframe. So when you look through that hole, you'll see the image behind it. And that's just general idea of how an iframe works. So imagine the page as you're moving that iframe around, the page underneath is picking up that mouse movement, right? Because it's a real person moving around the page. So mouse movement gets picked up. And again, early days, that's how fraud detection was done, is through mouse movement. But then when they clicked, what the programmer did was slide that page down to a link that they wanted to click, and somehow was able to pick up the click on the link on top page and the click through the iframe at the same time. So the iframe page loaded the new website, which you couldn't see. And meanwhile, jump onto that next page on the top. I forget all the technical details because it was really technical. And I was like, hats off to this guy. This is ingenious. Easy to catch.
Yeah, that is crazy. I mean, I don't know how you would even know that was even occurring. That's that's super crazy.
We knew it was fraud, but the only way we were able to catch it is because we heard click, click. Now today, when you click on a link, it doesn't click.
Yeah.
So I don't know if we would have been able to we caught it programmatically behind the scenes through the software. We were able to catch it with the software. So we knew there was fraud, but we were trying to dig further and trying to figure out what exactly, because as a developer, I'm always trying to figure out, okay, what were they thinking? So that when I block this and they realize I'm blocking this and they go to the next, what are they going to think next? Try to think like a developer, right? So you try to figure out exactly what the next evolution is of the software so you can stay ahead of it. And that was just one that stands out in my mind, even though it's 12 years old or something like that. It still stands out.
Wow, that's nuts for sure. And so wrapping up, if our audience is looking to learn more about you guys, do you recommend they just go to your site, sign up for a demo? What's like the best call to action you'd like them to do?
Yeah, I would go to Honor.io. We have a huge amount of information. We have over 300 blogs on the site that we've been writing over the years. We have tons of information on different verticals. There's a fraud calculator that we just posted, which is kind of cool. You put in how much money you're spending per month on digital marketing, check off the different channels of marketing, and it gives you an estimated based on the blended average of how much you're potentially losing to fraud right now.
Oh, wow.
We offer a 2-week free trial so people can get on board, test it out, play with all the functionality and features, make sure it works. Beautiful thing is if they're using Everflow, they can be up and running in 30 seconds. I mean, there's a checkbox, you put in your instance ID that we give you, you check off one other box, hit go, and Everflow and us are up and running. So integration is not scary.
For sure, that's fantastic. And anything, I know you mentioned that report that you have coming out. Anything else new that you guys have coming out next year that people should that you want to tell them about?
We have a new dashboard, an upgraded dashboard that we've been building in the last couple months. It was time for a refresh of our dashboard. So it was a complete from the ground up redesign from a programming standpoint, but everything's still in a very familiar place so that people that are comfortable with our dashboard now can still find what they're looking for. But we've added a huge amount of visualization graphs so that you can see from visually where the high levels of fraud are, where the high levels of good quality traffic are, different ways of just analyzing the data visually to give you a better visual representation of what's going on. So that's due to roll out early Q1.
Awesome. We'll look forward to checking that out. And thank you so much for your time today.
I appreciate it. Thanks a lot.
Cool. Have a great day.
All right. Thanks. See you guys later.
Bye.